The trifecta episode. Mate, CEO of Rumble Resources, you've had a take me back early years.
Okay, so I was selling gold, and believe it or not, at $400 Aussie an ounce, not
Crazy.
like a 6,500.
Crazy, eh?
So I did all of that, and then I think we were the first company ever to do a trading halt before we'd even actually started to trade. So we got a 2-day break, and he said, "Oh no, you better come on." And we were very successful because the nickel price did that. And
Far cry from today.
Far cry from today, and it went to $20 a pound. You know, and when we started, it was like $3. So we did really, really well. The nickel price sort of really collapsed, and we just thought, this is just crazy. It's like a car crash in slow motion because you can see it coming. You know, we knew we had to shut both those operations down because, you know, mines are not. You can't run them as a social experiment. I got into Rumble and I thought, jeepers creepers, the zinc prices, but not looking too great. Everything else was starting to move, but zinc wasn't. At a much lower gold price, if you put in the spot price, it makes $200 million over 2 years with a $10 million upfront capital cost. I mean, it's a Mickey Mouse little project.
What's the best advice, Pete? Welcome back to another episode on the Gold Room podcast. Today we have a trifecta episode. We were lucky enough to have Peter Harold in the studio to sit down with us, mate. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Not a bloody problem, mate. Voice for radio, not a face for radio. So so you're lucky there, mate. You've bloody got the whole package there.
I have.
Mate, CEO of Rumble Resources, you've had a awesome history in mining. So as you know, we always start off with the life and the times. We'll get into all the business stuff afterwards.
Yep.
But look, take me back early years.
Okay, so grew up in Melbourne. My father was a shoemaker, a company called Harold Shoes, which was, he was third generation. So my great-grandfather came out from England in the 1920s, set a factory up in Melbourne, and my grandfather ran it, and then Dad turned up there when he was 17. Dad wanted to be a farmer, and my grandfather basically bribed him into working at the factory by buying him a nice car when he was a young bloke and an old Jag, and he spent the next 54 years working at that factory. So he started at 17 and retired at 70 and made effectively in the end sort of R.M. Williams style boots, which are still made today, but they're now made in Vietnam. So as a kid, I worked there, spent a lot of time in that factory, loved that sort of manufacturing side. But my grandfather on my mother's side, so Peter Allnut, he was an engineer working at the Zinc works in Tasmania, in Hobart. So I had a bit of an interest in that as well. Did well in chemistry and maths. So got a gig at Melbourne Uni to study what was called a Bachelor of Applied Science in Chemistry, which was actually just a very groovy name for bucket chemistry. So I'm like an industrial chemist, if you like.
Okay.
Did that.
So a chemical engineering degree.
Type degree, yeah. So it was in the engineering faculty, but it was actually called a Bachelor of Applied Science. I hated it. I failed first year, got a faculty pass. Failed second year, got a faculty pass. Failed third year so bad I had to repeat the whole year.
Wow.
And then
what were you doing, mate? Did you
I was drinking,
doing...
partying, working.
Yep.
I had jobs in a ski shop, worked at Dad's factory, was doing catering stuff, anything but study. Because I really didn't enjoy the course that much. And all my mates were stockbroking or they were out earning money, right? This is pre the 87 crash, so the market was flying. And so, it was pretty hard to focus. And then in my fourth year, I really knuckled down and actually got honours.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And then
Turn the tables on it.
Yeah, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I'd applied for a couple of jobs, but I didn't want to be – I realised I didn't want to be a chemist or do research or something like that. I wanted to get a job. I was good with people, and I really wanted to get a people job. So I applied for a job. There was an ad in the paper in The Age for Shell graduate trainee, and it said Shell looking for pearls. And I applied for this job and got knocked back straight away. Anyway, about 4 weeks later, I was in the back of a friend's car on the way home from her 21st birthday, and her dad was driving the car, Gary Swan, and he said, "Peter, what are you going to do?" And I said, I've been applying for a couple of jobs.
How old are you right now?
I'm 21.
Yeah, okay.
And I must have been older than that. I must have been 22. Yeah, so he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I was half cut in the back of his car. I'll never forget this. He said, "You should apply for a job at Shell." And I said, "Well, I have, Gary," and I got knocked back. And he said, "Look, on Monday, ring this lady, someone in Southwell." And she was the lady who'd actually written me the letter saying, "There's no job here for you," right? So I got this. I rang her up, and she was a little bit sort of, like, oh, okay, okay, Peter, you better come back in again. So clearly, he'd obviously rung her.
What did he do?
Well, I reckon he was the head of lubrication engineering in Adelaide.
Yep.
But his daughter lived in Melbourne. And Gary Swan, he's still alive, and I spoke to him not long ago, and he obviously put a good word in for me, and I got this job,
Awesome.
right? So I turned up there as a graduate trainee, and even though I had a chemical engineering sort of background, I got straight into corporate. So I worked for the gas division. They had the LPG gas in those days called Go Gas, and I was like a development engineer there, which was just a marketing job effectively.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
And then after a year there, they gave me a job in the Victorian office as a fuels and lubricants engineer. And I basically gave me a car, and I could drive around Victoria, go to Tasmania, and basically help them sell lubricants. So,
How are you doing that?
Well, to the mining, to industry. And so you go up to Ballarat or Bendigo, that used to be all the gold mining towns in those days, because there was nothing going on there much. But there was a lot of industry. A lot of the car manufacturers got all their parts from there, like Empire Rubber and Henderson Springs, and all of those companies were all originally mining related, and they'd all sort of morphed into these car manufacturing components, and they were all buying oil and stuff, hydraulic oils, lubricating oils, base oils for making the rubber for the window strips
Seals,
and things,
yeah,
stuff
wow.
like that. So I got a bit of, and then I went down to Tassie, and I was dealing with the hydro and the zinc works and all that. So I got a bit of an interest in that, and I suddenly realised that I wanted to get a job where I went overseas with some mates when I was about 26 to Europe, and I suddenly thought, gee, it'd be good to get a job where someone pays me to sit up the front of the plane and fly around the world.
Nice, eh?
And I saw a job advertised in the Australian when I was on the beach on a holiday after I'd been at Shell for 3 years, and it said marketing manager, Perth-based, looking at lots of overseas travel. I went, gee, this looks good. And I rang.
Shit, you wouldn't see a job advertised like that nowadays, would you?
No, it's all online, right? This is in the Australian.
Yeah.
I never normally bought the Australian. I used to buy the Age, but there was no Ages at the general store I went to. So I grabbed the Australian, never read the Australian because I'm 26, never read it before. Saw this ad, and it had Slade Consulting, Andrew Padgham. He went to school with me, he's a year ahead of me.
Wow.
So I called him up on the Monday. I said, Padge, saw this job. He said, oh, you'd be great for that, Pete. So he said, send me your resume. I said, I haven't got one. So he said, well, just type something up. No, he said, write something up and fax it to me. This is before emails. Yep. And so I did that, and he drafted it into a CV, gave it to the guys who were actually, they had an office in Melbourne, but the main office was in Perth, a company called Australian Consolidated Minerals. They were a big gold and base metal producer back in the late 80s. And he said, yeah, this is, and I got a job interview in Melbourne, and then they flew me to Perth for the day for backwards and forwards on the plane.
Were you sitting up the front?
No, I was at the back, and in fact there were two guys from Shell on the plane that I knew, so I had to hide at the back of the plane because I kept on coming to the toilet and I was hiding them. And then got to the job interview, and I got the job, and it was marketing manager for ACM, but it was mainly working on Golden Grove. Okay. So we were building that. We were the main. I think we had 45% of the project. There was a couple of joint venture partners, and we were the project operator. So we were building the mine and the concentrator just out of Yalgoo there.
Yep.
So I didn't know anything about zinc other than what my grandfather had told me about the zinc works, but not about mining. That was all about processing. But I knew enough to be dangerous, and I got this job on my merits. And my boss was a guy called Alan Evans, who was he was the finance director. He was based in Melbourne, and he just loved travelling. And we had joint ventures with the Japanese, the Koreans. They were our customers. The Germans, a company called Metallgesellschaft. So in my first year of the job, I basically spent 16 weeks in Perth, and the rest of the time I was on aeroplanes flying around the world, up the front.
Exactly what you wanted.
But Alan was in first class and I was in business class, so we'd get on the plane together and he'd sit up the very front, and sometimes I got upgraded. But 26 years of age, it was amazing. And so we had the Korea Zinc, we were one of their biggest suppliers. And then I was looking after I'd never done any shipping before in my life, and we were chartering these 30,000 tonners to take zinc and copper concentrate all around the world, Japanese smelter pools, and every year you had to renegotiate the contracts. So I'd fly up to Japan and Korea with guys like Robin Boyer and Peter King, who were like famous in the industry, and I was like this 26-year-old that didn't.
Well, you must have held your own.
Well, I learnt so much,
Awesome.
and I learnt to listen, because I'm quite a good talker. But Alan and all these other guys were really good. And Alan had spent a lot of time in CRA. He'd lived in the Philippines. He'd done a lot of work in marketing in coal, and they knew how to deal with the Koreans and the Japanese and even the Germans. And every negotiation was different, and you learn so much about other people. The way that the Japanese negotiated was just try and wear you down, and you'd go and have a meeting in the morning, and then you'd have lunch, and then you'd go back in the afternoon, and then you'd have dinner, and you'd be arguing over 25 cents, and they just wouldn't give in. So in the end, you'd have to come back to Australia and say, we haven't settled, we'll have to go back again. So jump on a plane again and fly back. So we did that, and that was of 3 years I did that.
Wow.
And I learned so much from Alan and a lot of guys at ACM, because I was working in the office and we had Mount Keith, which we were trying to develop as a big nickel project, and that's how I got into nickel through that Mount Keith project. And we used to go to Finland because they were our joint venture partners, Outokumpu. It was like doing a crash MBA with all these really smart guys, and I was just like their understudy,
Wow.
And so you just sucked it all up. It was amazing, and I learned so much in those 3 years through all of those guys at ACM, Alan, Ken Fletcher, and then lots of other guys, Perth-based geologists and mining engineers. A guy called Brian Davis who ended up running Pasminco, and they were all sort of like my mentors. And I'm still in touch with most of them today because they just gave me so much knowledge. And, like we were talking before about, just learning. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was about 38.
Yeah.
And I went and got like an assessment done. And the lady said, you're really coming back strongly, like you want to run your own business. And I think
entrepreneurial zest.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And so then what did I do then? Well, then ACM got taken over. And so then we went back to live in Melbourne. I just got engaged to a Perth girl who'd come back from living in London, Ariane. And so we got offered to go to Adelaide with Normandy Poseidon, who'd taken over ACM. But we thought, we'll go back to Melbourne. So we went to Melbourne with all the ACM guys. They formed a company called MPI, which stands for Mining Project Investors.
Yep.
And I was like this sort of, I was just really a corporate executive in doing project evaluations. We then found Silver Swan, which I got involved in again through Poseidon. And basically they wanted me to be the marketing manager for that. So we built that mine and shipped the concentrate out of Esperance up to Finland. And so I looked after all of that side of it, which was what I'd sort of become a bit of a specialist in. We had the Store gold mine, and I did all the insurance for the company. I did the hedging, so I was selling gold, and believe it or not, at $400 Aussie an ounce, not
Crazy.
like 6,500.
Crazy, eh?
So I did all of that, and then when I was about 38, my wife Ari was pregnant with our first boy Oscar, and I got offered a job to come back and set up a mining company over here, which was called Sally Malay Mining, which then became Panoramic, and that was what we floated. So that's kind of the history of how I got back to WA and into mining, and then into sort of CEO type roles.
Mate, what an awesome history, and I can see that you're passionate about it. Yeah. You've loved the industry from the moment you got involved.
Totally.
Take me back to your time at Panoramic.
Yes. So some good friends of mine that I'd met when I lived here that were friends of my wife's, really, Ariane. That was a guy called Alistair Cook, another guy called Craig Burton. And Alistair was the geologist. He was my age, and Craig was the sort of financier. And they wanted to buy this project called Sally Malay, which from Normandy. I think we paid $1.8 million for it, or Craig did. And then we did this float, which was called Sally Malay Mining. So we raised $3 million in 2001. Literally, we had to raise a minimum of $3 million, and it was really hard work. And we got to 2.7, and I think we were almost cooked. And then I had a mate in Melbourne, a stockbroker by the name of Michael Rosenbaum, Bimmer, and Bimmer said, no, mate, we can get the other 300 for you. And I think his old man might have written half the check out. Anyway, we got the float done, and we listed the day after the Twin Towers came down.
Oh.
And so...
how did that go?
Well, badly, because we actually I think the guy that was running the stock exchange, Brendan O'Hara, said, "You guys, you don't want to come on tomorrow because there'd be carnage." And we went, "Oh," he said, well, why don't you do a suspension?" I think we were the first company ever to do a trading halt before we'd even actually started to trade. So we got a 2-day break, and he said, "Oh no, you better come on." And I remember going down to my wife flew over. She was heavily pregnant with Oscar, so this is in September, and he was born in November. And we went down to the stock exchange and to ring the bell at 10 in the morning, and they matched up the trades. And the first, it was a 20-cent IPO. First trade was 14 cents, so we were like underwater badly. And then we had quite a few guys that had got in at 10 cents in the seed, and half of that was free trading. So they were just punching the stock out. So it went all the way down to 11 cents. So our market cap was like about $6 or $7 million. So it wasn't a great start. And then look, we sort of got through that. I bought some more shares at 11 cents, and so did my dad. I remember he knew nothing about the share market, being a shoemaker. And then we sort of got the project feasibility study out. We got it financed. We borrowed $45 million from Macquarie Bank and Standard Bank, guys that I'd known through the industry over my time. And we got that financed and built, open pit first and then an underground.
Awesome.
And then we bought Lanfranchi as well off Western Mining. So we had 2 mining projects, by then both underground, and we were producing 20,000 tonnes of nickel either in concentrate or in ore. And we got the market cap in 2007 from basically $6 million at that IPO to $1.2 billion. So, and we had 400 people working for us. We were owner operating both those mines, generating $100 million a year of free cash, paying dividends. It was incredible.
That's amazing.
But it was because we had really good people working for us. I mean, I was just the collector of people. I didn't really, I didn't know, I wasn't a mining engineer, I wasn't a metallurgist. I just knew enough to be dangerous. But we got a really good bunch of people around us. Would
you say that's a strength of yours?
Totally.
It always has been from, those younger years, being able to pick great people.
I think, and I'd never been I never run a team or anything like that. Like I wasn't the captain of the footy team. I was a terrible footballer, 0 eye hand. My dad used to laugh, but I was a gymnast and a runner at school because
really?
I got better eye hand as I got older. But don't ask me to play golf because I'm terrible.
Yeah, but I'm no great at golf either, mate.
No, anything with a sport.
I'm good at drinking some beers on the golf course.
Yes, I could do that as well. sit in the cart.
Yeah.
So I got all these great people together. We had a great board. We had a great executive team, and we had some fun. It was great.
Awesome.
And we were very successful because the nickel price did that. And
far cry from today.
And it went to $20 a pound. And when we started, it was like $3. So we did really, really well. But then of course the GFC came, and that was tough. But we kept operating, and we continued to produce gold, produce nickel. We tried to diversify. We bought a couple of gold projects, a couple of PGM projects as well, because I could see, I was thinking that the gold price will run at some stage, and PGMs as well, which they did. And I ended up running that company for 18 years. We changed the name from Sally Malay Mining to Panoramic, which was the name of the street that I grew up in Melbourne. Beautiful. Panoramic Road, Northbourne. So, because that was just such fond memories of my childhood and stuff. So that was a good name. And it was sort of a bit of a, Panoramic, the big view. And we ran that for 18 years. And then we ran out of ore at Lanfranchi, and we hadn't been able to buy another operating asset. We'd tried, we'd looked at some, but we'd missed out on a few. And we sort of ran out of a bit of horsepower and momentum. And we still had Savannah, which we'd changed the name from Sally Malay to Savannah. And that had been a 3.5 year project, which ran for 14 years. Wow. And so we ended up, the nickel price sort of really collapsed, and we just thought, this is just crazy. It's becoming a social experiment.
What year did the nickel
2016. Price? So after, 14 years of operation, continuous operation through the peaks and the trough, we pulled up stumps and we parked it up, and we'd parked up Lanfranchi about 6 months before that. Tough decision. We had to let, the best part of 400 people go and paid them all out. They all got their redundancies. And
it's mining though.
That's mining.
Ride the wave.
And and so then we sat on it for a couple of years. We sold Lanfranchi, which we got quite a good price for that, to Black Mountain. And then we did some studies on the deeper ore body, Sally Malay Deeps, and we decided to restart again a couple of years later, and that was a really tough restart. Just getting the people, and it was a lot deeper, and we're trying to mine remnants and also drive out to this new ore body, which was pretty deep. And in the end, it was just one of those things that it just wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the chairman and I sat down, and we just decided that it was probably best if I had went and did something else, and had a bit of a break. I'd been there for too long, I think, and starting something up, stopping, and then starting again is probably not ideal. So I learned a bit of a lesson there too.
But you stuck it out because from there, still obviously a love for nickel.
Yes,
and off to Poseidon.
Yeah, and then as I was leaving Panoramic, the phone rang, and someone at Black Mountain said, would you be interested in going to Poseidon? And I knew the asset because they had Silver Swan along with which we discovered at MPI. So I'd started.
Is that anything to do with? Did they have anything
Black
to do
Swan?
with Black Swan?
Yeah, that's the same project. So Silver Swan was the deep underground. Black Swan was the open pit. So same project. And I'd known that. I didn't know much about Lake Johnson, and I knew about Windara because that was the start of the original nickel boom. So I knew all the history there, and I got in there. And in those days, Forest was a big shareholder as well as Black Mountain. They were sort of about the same. And I looked at it and thought, gee, this is a tough project. It needs a higher nickel price. And the nickel price was really soft. And so we basically looked at the gold project there. There was a tailings gold project. So we did that for about 12 months, and that looked all right. I mean, it looked fantastic at these prices. But then the nickel price started to recover. So we sort of started doing the full bankable feasibility study for restarting Black Swan again. And we did that for 2 years, and the nickel price went up, but then it really fell back again when the Indonesian started to really kick in because there was just so much nickel coming onto the market that no one anticipated the volume.
That plant that they're running over
there. Yeah, huge. And
huge.
There's something like $35 billion US dollars came in, mostly from China, to develop, a number of those projects. And they went from producing no nickel metal, all ore that was being shipped offshore, to producing something like 60% of the world's nickel in about 5 years. Yeah. And everyone thought, they wouldn't do it. And because it was HPAL, it would be slow to start up. And they did, and they smashed it. And they had cheap power, hydropower, cheap labour, obviously environmentally, pretty light on.
Have you seen some of
you've seen some of the footage.
The footage, it's horrific.
Yeah, it's horrific. And I think that will have an impact at some point in time. But right now, the buyers are the Chinese, and there's less concern. And the other thing
in China,
that's right. The other thing was they got a 15-year tax holiday as well, so they really got some incentives to get that business going. And because they were only producing intermediate, they didn't actually have to produce the metal, so they're only producing the mixed material that would go up to China. So they kind of snookered us a bit, and certainly high cost. In Western Australia, in Kalgoorlie, with it was an open pit and an underground. So we were mining sort of 0.4% nickel, pretty low grade. High grade Silver Swan underground, but very deep, a K deep, pulling all that up and then mixing it with a bit of tailings to get the right sort of iron MgO mix. It wasn't an easy project, and we were having to refurb the concentrator, which had been shut for quite a few years, only 1 million tonnes, so we had to sort of derate it. It was going to end up being a $100 million investment. And we had offtake. We'd signed a deal, or we were about to sign a deal with someone, but you could just see that the nickel price was not going to hold up. And I was saying to the board, we've got to be careful here because, we don't want to borrow $100 million because we'll blow ourselves up.
Yep.
And so we didn't. And it was definitely the right call. And I then said to the board, look, we've got to, I was getting paid a big salary to develop the project, and we weren't going to develop it. So
what was that? I mean, it's readily available online.
I think I was getting $600,000 a year, which was a big salary, right? Yep. But that was to build the project and borrow $100 million and bring it into production. So that was my sort of experience. So I just said to the board, look, this isn't going to work. We can't do it. It's going to be crazy. We'll blow ourselves up, and the shareholders. So we said, let's shrink the board down. We went
from what to what?
I think it was 5 to 3, and so 2 of the directors left of their own accord, which was good because that dropped the salaries back quickly.
Yep.
I then went from from MD to non-exec chairman to sort of stay with the business and help the younger guys that we put on. We put Craig Jones in as the CEO. And he did a great job until he got grabbed by Spartan, and he decided to go there, which was a good call for him.
Yep.
And so then our CFO, Brendan Shoulders, stepped up, and it was just so hard to raise dough. So in the end, we looked at it and thought, look, the best thing we could do here would be merge with someone. So we ran a process, and Horizon Minerals, not Horizon Gold, which there was a very different company that I was the chairman of at one stage. So Horizon Minerals had all the projects around Kalgoorlie, but they didn't have a mill. So that was Ashok Parekh. He was the chairman of that. So that was the best sort of deal that we could do. And funnily enough, Warren Hallam was on both boards, so he knew both the assets pretty well. So that was kind of like the best deal that we could do. So we decided to do that deal. And in hindsight, that was the best deal for shareholders, because otherwise we would have had to raise money at, I don't know, 0.5 cent, 1/4 cent. We would have just blown the capital out the wazoo. So, and I'd actually gone to work at Rumble at that stage. So I was non-exec chairman, really assisting, Craig and Brendan. But we put it into a good home, and I think now with the gold price and they are starting to do that refurb to the Poseidon shareholders will end up doing well out of that deal. It'll take a bit of time, but they're going to get their money back and some, I think, because gold's the place to be, right?
Sure is.
Yeah. So, but then I stepped into Rumble, and of course, we had this massive zinc project, which was back to my roots again. Sort of
I was
going
just
back
about to say that.
Absolutely, back to my days of my grandfather at the zinc works in Tasmania. We'd go down there for holidays, and he'd drive us around and show us some of the things that he'd built. It's pretty.
That's
amazing.
what every dad or that's what every I'm a Sparky boy trader.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked there, mate, or I've
done that. Yeah.
Put some lights in over there.
Yeah. But it's good as a young kid. You do get it stays with you that. And I always thought that zinc would have its day again, because it's the 4th most consumed metal in the world. And I thought, look, it's a big project. I mean, Irahidi is one of the biggest zinc discoveries in the last 30 years, right? So it really tempted me. And I knew a couple of the directors well, certainly Peter Venn and also Matt Banks. And, they were really keen to get me on board. I mean, they ran a process, and there were other people that were interested, but the timing was just right. I wanted to step away from Poseidon to allow that to have its own course, but still be involved, because I was passionate about it. And, I'd been there for 4 years, and I wanted to see it through. But I knew it wasn't going to produce nickel anytime soon, so we had to do something different, which is what we did. And the tie-up with Horizon Minerals was the right one to do. So then I got into Rumble, and I thought, jeepers creepers, the zinc prices, but not looking too great. Everything else was starting to move, but zinc wasn't. And I could see that the supply-demand metrics were there's plenty of zinc around at the moment. There was no shortage. So I then said, well, gee, what are we going to do here? And then we had this gold project called Western Queen, which and when I got there, we were running out of cash. We'd spent a lot of money. We'd raised, I think, Rumble before I got there raised $40 million at about 40 cents.
Wow.
And they did all that. They spent all that money on drilling out Irahidi, and 2 million tonnes of zinc, nearly 1 million tonnes of lead, and 12 million ounces of silver. It's a big resource, all open pittable. And but the money was getting a bit tight, and so we needed to raise some dough. So we said, well, why don't we sell the gold? So this is 2 years ago.
What about gold and tungsten?
Yeah,
you found there?
We didn't know the tungsten was there, to be honest.
Wow.
So we just knew it as a small gold project, about 180,000 ounces at about 2 grams. So you've got to remember 2 years ago the gold price was probably half where it is today.
Yeah.
So we ran a little process, and we found a buyer. It was going to be $10 million up front and another 10 on milestone payments, $20 million. It sounded pretty reasonable. And we were going to then put that money into, sort of bringing the zinc project along towards feasibility study. And thank God the guys that went to buy this thing couldn't get the finance away. So we hung on to it. And then we could see that it was going to get harder and harder to raise money for the zinc project. So we sort of had another look at the gold, and the geologist did a sort of a recut of the resource, and they'd had some drill results that they added to it, and amazingly they were able to increase the tonnes up to the number of ounces from about 180,000 ounces to 280,000 ounces in about October of last year.
How do they go about doing that? If it's 180 up to 280, how do they add another 100?
Well,
do they go back and drill?
They used some drill results that they hadn't put into the model, and I think they they just domained it better, and they really sort of had another look at what had been done previously.
New geos?
Yeah, different geos always have a different look on it, but they just tightened it up.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not a geo, as you know, but they did good work on that, and that allowed us to raise some money, because up until then it had been a really tough story, because a small medium grade gold project with no mill, and we had this big zinc project, and everyone thought we were a zinc company, but the gold had sort of been forgotten about. So we had to sort of really pivot without sort of saying that we're not going to continue on with the zinc, because we
And plus, you've got shareholders who've
who've put a
dollary
lot
dues
of money
down.
in at 40 cents. The stock was down to about 7 cents, and then it was it was tough. But we got Canaccord and MST involved, and MST Access in Sydney, and they raised just about $5 million, and this Indian group that are associated with Mega came in and sort of
BGC?
Yes, that's right.
BRG?
No, Bain Global Resources, BRG. So they're a big coal mining
BGR.
contractor. BGR, that's right, Bain Global Resources. And they put about $2 million in, and they sort of effectively cornerstoned that raise.
Beautiful.
And then Toby Dennis at Argonaut, and not Argonaut, at Canaccord, and the brokers in Sydney, Ed Hawke and the guys at MST were really helpful in getting that fundraising. And that allowed us to then drill deeper and sort of do some more infill drilling at Western Queen South. And so we then upgraded the resource from 280,000 ounces at 2 grams to 370,000 ounces at 3 grams. So it made a huge difference, right? So we basically then had a project, right? We thought, gee, this is looking really interesting. And we'd also were looking at Mega doing an open pit. And then we suddenly thought, gee, maybe we should look at an underground. So we got a guy that had worked for me previously at Panoramic, a guy called John Bailey, and another guy, Chris Williams, to sort of project manage a study, just a preliminary study. And it came back looking really good, mining from underground, coming in at the bottom of the pit and mining, because it's 3 gram dirt and it's steeply dipping. So it's a pretty small little project. And then running a decline off that over to Western Queen Central. And, you're talking about, some plenty of mineralisation. The issue then became is where do we go?
No open pit, straight to underground.
Straight to underground. Yeah. So we thought that's what we've ended up sort of going with. And we just last week we put out the scoping study, very initial, just on Western Queen South, 60,000 ounces over 2 years, at just under 3 grams. Makes $120 million of free cash.
Yep.
At a much lower gold price. If you put in the spot price, it makes $200 million over 2 years with a $10 million upfront capital cost. I mean, it's a Mickey Mouse little project. And so we thought, gee, that's great. And then we've got all the exploration potential. We've got Western Queen Central. So we're going to infill that as we are now with that drilling. So luckily enough, we've been able to we did another raise a few months ago, and we got knocked over in the rush. I mean, by then the share price was around about 3.5 cents. So we did it at 2.5, but we got $9 million. Which was a combination of a placement and a rights issue, which was fantastic because, you sort of go back 12 months, it was hard to raise any money at all. But obviously the gold price has run. And then we discovered the tungsten as well, which was great work by the geo. So not known as a tungsten resource, but we've ended up with a maiden tungsten resource of about 13,000 tonnes, which is equivalent to 1.5 to 2 grams of gold probably. So you add that to the mix and it starts to look really interesting. And then the other issue was, where are we going to treat this stuff? Because you've got Ramelius, who are busy obviously with the Spartan and Dalgaranga, and we were hoping that they might turn the Dalgaranga mill on, but at this stage it looks like they're going to put all their effort into Checkers. You've got Westgold up at Tuckabianna, which is about 100 k's away too, but they seem to have enough material. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a call from a guy called Mike Tilley, who is involved with Kirkalocka, and he used to be a shareholder at MPI. And he said, Pete, I see you're working at running Rumble. We'd be interested in processing your gold at Kirkalocka. We're going to restart that.
Well, they're going through the process as we speak now.
Which is the old Adaman resource we talked about. So, I mean, they're going to refinance that. So last week I went up and with one of the other directors, Peter, and we saw the drilling. We've got DDH1 we've got 2 diamond rings up there. We're drilling infill and extensional at both Western Queen South and Central. And then we went down and saw Kirkalocka, and I walked in and there's 2 blokes that used to work for us at Panoramic up at Savannah, Husey and another guy. So, it's a very small world, right?
It is mining.
Yeah, and they're basically going to be running. Well, they're almost about to press a button on the refurb, and it's a 2 million tonne mill, and it's in good nick.
Yep.
And so that's only 170 k's or 180 k's away. So very doable for us. Truck the ore up to Mount Magnet and then down the highway. So
with those multiple resources, how do you go about processing all of those?
Well, we'll do it sequentially, I think. So, well, when I say that, we'll start off at Western Queen South, and we've got 2 years at about 35 or 30,000 ounces a year, so 300 to 400,000 tonne a year. But then we can put the decline, a drive across underground, and then start accessing Western Queen Central. So we could actually, up the production rate by having more gear over there. So potentially then you could ramp it up. So that's the study that we'll do now. So once we've got so we're now looking at financing the start of Western Queen South. So that's the 10 million of capital. So we've got to pump water out of the open pit, put that into the bigger pit above Western Queen Central, clean the bottom of the pit up, and that's about 6 months from cutting the portal, into ore. So we could be, if we can start pumping water out in February, we could be putting ore through Kirkalocka, December, January.
Wow, far out. That's promising.
But then you could ramp it up, put that other decline across and be into Western Queen Central as well. And then there's a couple of open pits as well too. So there's a huge opportunity there.
Yep.
And then the tungsten. Now we're doing the metallurgy. The tungsten sort of sits proximal to the gold. So it's associated, it's next to it. So as we go underground, we can bring that ore up to surface or leave it there and bring it up at a later time, stockpile it. It looks like it's going to need to go through some sort of gravity circuit, which we could either build at Western Queen, or we could even do a deal with the guys at Kirkalocka and put a processing plant there. So a lot of options.
I'm sure they'd be happy about that, mate.
Yeah, they look anything, because they're starting up on a tolling deal. So at this stage, they're not going to toll any of their or process their own ore. It's all going to be third party. So adding tungsten to the circuit would be pretty simple.
Is there some sort of government grants that you could be looking at for?
I'm pretty sure there would be. We haven't got into that yet, but absolutely
certainly have a look at it, because like tungsten's, everyone's singing out for it. China's not wanting to release any of it.
And 85% of the world's tungsten currently comes from China. So everyone's looking for how to get out of the Chinese
other
supply.
Options.
Yeah, so we've already signed CAs with a couple of people to have a look, and they're just waiting to see the metallurgy. But it looks like it'll produce a 40 to 50% tungsten concentrate, and that could then be shipped, say, out of Geraldton up to Vietnam or anywhere else that would process it. And the economics on the back of the envelope look amazing. And so that would be a co-product stream for us. So, you plug that in with the current gold price, and this thing, when you look at our market cap, you just go, this is ridiculous. It's got to be one of the most undervalued assets. But it's because it's got that zinc history. Yep. And so a lot of people went into it for that. And so it's taking them time to work out, when you pivot to something else, it often takes time. The shareholders sort of don't always understand it. So it's up to me, really.
To sell it.
To sell it. And to sell the company as a different story.
Yeah.
But the zinc's still there. It's still got that as effectively a free option on the zinc price, really.
Yeah, well, you just sit back and wait and watch what happens. But I like the gold and the tungsten story.
Yeah, it's a great story.
That's amazing. And if you're in with Rumble as a zinc shareholder, and then suddenly you've got all these other minerals on the horizon, far out. What a ripper business to be a part of.
Yeah, and we've also got a really, really strong geological team. We've got Brett Keeler as a consultant who's been, he was one of the guys that was in the discovery team for Tropicana and quite a few Resolute projects. Well, Peter Venn, and then we've got two young and really keen geos as well in Hamish Cowie and Simon Davies. These guys are really punching above their, they're young guys, but they're so. We've just, promoted Simon to exploration manager and doing a fantastic job. He's only been there for a couple of weeks, but they're just really dedicated. And so we've got in our DNA is definitely discovery. And you look at Irahidi and even what they've done with the tungsten. These are all things that weren't known. So that's off to the boys. And then I bring that sort of marketing, financing, development sort of experience, as does Peter and Trevor, our CFO. So we've got the skill set in there. I mean, Jeff Jones, who's our new chairman, he's running Macca, and prior to that, he was running GR. So he's got all that experience there, which is great. And then, so we're very lucky that and it's a really nice bunch of people to work for. And that, as you get older, it's all
Makes a difference, doesn't it?
It does.
You know,
we have that no dickhead policy. You just, life's too short.
Yeah, we've got that same policy here, mate.
It's a very important policy. And look, and I mean it sincerely. I mean, you don't want to be working with people who you don't like working with, because eventually
you can go through it when you're a little bit younger and you can deal with it all.
You can put up with it, that's right. But when you're 62, life's too short. So I just have found that, and I think that we are on the cusp of, we're only 12 months away from being in production, and we don't have to build a mill. That would be getting all of that approved, and tailings dams and all of that. And the cost of doing things is astronomical these days. So I just think
the work involved in putting a tailings dam together with
just getting
all the permits, it's ridiculous.
The approvals, that's exactly right. So, what used to take a year now takes 4 or 5. So I just think that, and that's where you've seen now people that have done well in growing businesses have bought assets that are either operating or permitted, right? So it's like a property developer, buying something that's already permitted. So I think that's really become a problem all around the world now. It's just getting approval. So it's delayed. It's always a risk. And so I think, we're just lucky that we're on granted mining leases. There's been mining there before. We've got a route to processing. It's a hungry mill. We've got an MOU. We've got a draft agreement with them we're reviewing now. So we're just in a good position, and we can get going, with a capital cost of, under $10 million. I mean, that's incredible today.
That's amazing. Mate, I want to get into, obviously, with all your experience, you've built these amazing teams, leadership, resilience. Let's go into a bit of that.
Yeah. Well, certainly, the history of Panoramic we talked about before. We started off, there were, I think, 3 of us in the office, and we grew that to 400 people, 2 sites. We had about 30 or 40 people in head office in Perth office. And we were doing projects we had an office in Canada. We'd bought an asset over there in Thunder Bay, a PGM project. So we were going global. And, we had, I think at one stage we had $200 million on the balance sheet, $100 million in cash and $100 in the money hedge book.
That's a good place to be.
That was a good place to be. But, but then nickel price collapsed, and, we had to let all those people go. And that was a really tough time. And probably in my career, that was the thing that really affected me the most, having to let people go.
You reckon a few sleepless nights?
Oh, more than a few. You just ask my wife. I mean, it was a very torrid time, because it's like a car crash in slow motion, because you can see it coming. We knew we had to shut both those operations down, because, mines are not, you can't run them as a social experiment. We just didn't have the balance sheet to get through, and we would have chewed up 2, 3, 4 years of resource and made no money out of it, which was just madness, right? So
that's not in the best interests of the shareholders.
It's not, and so that's why we parked them up, and we hadn't found any decent ore bodies at Lanfranchi after Deakin, which was a ripper. But you needed to find, you needed to keep replacing those reserves all the time, and the Sally Malay deeps was deep. It was 700 metres below surface, and so it was an expensive operation to develop and mine. So. Right call, but geez, it was tough on me, because I'd pretty handpick most of those people, and it just was an awful situation to be in. And I remember my father going through it in the shoe business and he had to do it twice. He had to pull up stumps in the late 70s, and I remember him coming home, 3rd generation family business, employing 100 people, having to let everybody go. And I remember that very, very well in the, I think, late 70s. And then having the same problem again about 10 years later, when one of his major buyers sort of went broke, and so Dad was in trouble again, and so he had to basically sell the business. So I remember those things vividly, and I think sort of probably in my own mind that was tough, and I remember I had a lot of sleepless nights, sleepless months actually, and it really takes its toll on you. But
and your family.
Well, certainly your relationship with my wife, because you're not sleeping and you're just worried about things, and you're looking at you wake up in the middle of the night and you're looking at the nickel price, and you're looking at and then of course the social the hot coppers of this world, that they start to smash you. You just get Peter Harold's done this, he's done that, he's hopeless. It's awful, and you try not to read it, but you can't help it, and they just smash you. It's like it's your fault that the nickel price is 25% of what it was at the good times. But when people lose money, they look for someone to blame, and the go-to person is the MD or the CEO. So you cop it. So
and the story that I like is I always say, we don't talk about politics, religion, or bad quarterly reports on the show because if you think about it, you're only a bloody drill hole away, one drill hole away from it being a ripper quarterly report. So who are these people out there? I want to try and do something that's going to bolster the industry, rather than tearing it down, because everyone's out there. I hear stories like this all the time. Everyone's out there having a crack. There's the guys, the operators of the world, or the maintenance teams. Everyone's out there working, but so is corporate.
That's right. And I think and I understand it because those people mostly are mums and dads, and they've lost money. They've invested and they've seen the share price collapse, and they don't necessarily look at they don't get inside the business and say, well, okay, have they run out of reserves? Have they not replaced those? What's happened to the commodity price, the currency? Is there some other fatal flaw that's happened, like has there been a seismic event, which is what happened at Lanfranchi? All of those things and they're all written up, but a lot of people don't read the announcents, right? So they just look at the share price and they go, oh, this guy's hopeless. And then
some of those PDF documents, though, Pete, like far out. There's a lot of, I read through a few of them on occasion, but there's a lot of information.
There is.
That you got to try and
and you've got to sort of decipher it. And I think now with just the small videos and the short things, I think people are getting the messages across better than they did in the past. Where you really had to go through 30 or 40 page documents, especially like the annual reports and stuff, to really understand how the business is going. So that was tough. But so life lessons, I suppose. I look back on it now with Panoramic, and we should have bought one of those assets that we looked at. Even if it was too expensive, it would have got us through that sort of that dip. So that was something we looked at, an asset which was an absolute ripper, and it was a big call. It was a $700 or $800 million acquisition, but we could have done it. But we got cold feet. The GFC had come, and we were going to have to borrow. We were going to do a junk bond issue to finance it, and it was just all a little bit sort of. But that asset's gone on to be an absolute ripper, and the commodity as well. I won't say what it is, but it would have been a bull terror. So I wish we'd done that. So regrets.
Well, that's a learning curve,
curve,
and at least you now know.
Yeah, I do.
Would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely. And I would have paid 20-30% more than what we didn't pay. Yeah.
So you take those skills that you've learned into this role.
Well, as you mentioned before,
Rumble.
Timing's everything, right? And you can't predict commodity prices. You certainly can't predict what the drill is going to find or not find. And you can spend a lot of money and find nothing. You can spend a little bit of money and find something. So
look at Westgold. That
Gold.
Father's Day find was a nickel mine turned gold mine overnight.
Well, what about that was the one
the Father's Day find at Higginsville.
Beta Hunt.
Beta Hunt, that's right.
And so we'd looked at that, and we couldn't get our mind around.
If you bought that, mate, you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me.
But we looked at it a number of times, but from the nickel perspective, because gold back then, and we could have bought that. I think we could have picked it up for 20 or 30 million bucks, right? I mean, they were desperate to sell it. That was a Canadian group, and I remember talking to the MD, Mark Selby, and he sort of rang me up and said, "Oh, no, we can do a discounted raising. Can you help us?" And I was like, "Oh, mate, we're struggling here. I can't use the cash." Now, if I'd done that, we'd probably own that asset today. Kiora, which became, obviously, so amazing story. But look, missed opportunities. But we had a great run, and our shareholders, if you put money into Panoramic at the float at 20 cents, it got to $6.20.
Mate.
Yeah, so
you're out there doing the right thing.
We paid out, I think, 30 cents in fully franked dividends as well for a little small. So you effectively could have got $6.50 back, including the dividend. Might have been a bit more than that. So I had a lot of mates that came in the seat at 10 cents, and
hope they bought you a bloody beer.
Well, I got bottles of cases of wine sent to me, but some of them it was. I remember my secretary, Vera, she did really well out of her options, and it was great to see all these people, make a lot of money. Strangely enough, I actually held my shares, most of them, all the way through after I left the restart, and, poor old Panoramic ended up going into administration a few years ago, and I still had all my shares. So that was a bit crazy. So that was another one, sell on the way up, not on the way down.
Yeah, you did
and
say
certainly
that.
don't hold them to the end.
Well, mate, actually, that brings us to it. This is always my last
Yes,
question.
yes.
The best advice
Yeah.
what's the best advice, Pete?
Look, I personally, it would be, I've been so lucky that I married a wonderful lady, and she's stuck with me through the tough times. And
3
the good
beautiful
times.
children, you said?
3 fantastic boys, Oscar, Banjo, and Finnegan.
Banjo?
Banjo's the middle one.
Awesome.
Yeah, Oscar and Finnegan. So
Wow.
I've been blessed, but she has been a rock, right? Because it's been tough. I mean, I really get emotional about, when shareholders are losing money, you feel it, right? And you've got to let people go and stuff. And so, your partner bears a lot of that, and she's been incredible, and she's been very supportive. She's given me, sort of things to help to deal with it and stuff like that. Always, she's been amazing, and I couldn't have done it without her. So that's the first thing. Have a very supportive partner, and tell them what's going on through thick and thin, so they understand why.
Communication's key.
Communication, and sometimes I'm not very good at doing that. She would attest to, but most of the time she gets it out of me eventually. And then the other one is, as I said before, you've got to sell some. When you've got to take some money off the table, and I always like to see when guys take money off the table, not when they sell it all. There's been one recently, I won't mention the name of the company, where sort of everyone sold every single share that they had, and sort of that was a bit unexpected. But I think on the way up, you should take some off the table. And I didn't. I mean, I did a little bit, but way too early. So but you can't look back either. You got to look forward, and that's really difficult. So, but yeah, I mean, and the other one that's really important is mentors. I had some fantastic mentors, and I didn't think of them at the time as mentors, but I look back on it now, and my mother was amazing. My dad in some ways too. My grandfather on my mother's side especially, because he was an amazing, very clever guy, highly read. Engineer, but also big into environment, huge, big bushwalker, and I've spent a lot of time with him. He's an amazing guy. As I got older, I really understood the value of that relationship. But then all those guys I worked for, Alan Evans and Brian Phillips and Ken Fletcher, Brian Davis. I mean, amazing guys, and so knowledgeable, and also really willing to, teach people. And you had to prove yourself. I remember when I first worked for Brian Davis, he wasn't sure about me, and I remember going up to Geraldton, and I didn't tell him I was going to go and see. I went to the port without seeing the boss of the port, and it got back to Brian, and he was really cross with me, and I sort of tried to sort of basically say, and then I just went, Brian, I stuffed up. And I think he really respected me for basically falling on my sword.
Yep.
And after I did that, I think the relationship between him and I changed. And I still speak to him today. He's in his 80s now. He's retired. He's always interested in what my career's doing. He nicknamed me the Gucci deckhand because I wore a pair of designer jeans onto our first shipment out of Geraldton, and he was on there having a beer, and he said, you got your Gucci bloody shoes on, mate, or your Gucci pants on. So I was the Gucci deckhand. He still calls me that today. But look, I mean, those people really, because I didn't know much about mining. So they taught me about the industry, and they were great. So it was that mentoring is really key. And I sort of urge any young people in any industry to get mentors, even if they're just not, it doesn't have to be like, you're my mentor. It's just someone who you respect. And I love it now when my friends' kids get in contact with me and say, Pete, can you help me? And we've got one young bloke now, Hugo, who's up at site, who came in for an interview, really just to have a chat. And now he's a fieldy up at site. He's
awesome.
a geo doing all the work up at Western Queen and loving it, So that's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, that's what you need to do. Support. And the WA Mining Club does a really good job
of that.
with supporting young people
they
coming in, and the mentor, Barry at the WA Mining Club.
Barry Upton.
Yeah, he's exceptional.
Yeah, he did work for us. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
When he was at what was it? Ruck. Yeah. So no, they did some work for us up at Savannah. Yeah, no. I mean, that's what you need, and it's great seeing guys like that who have retired, who are prepared to give their time.
That's not retired.
Well, no, it's true.
I mean, he is in retirement. That's what I was saying to him.
Yeah. But he's a guy that was always a big one about bringing the young ones up. And I look at all the guys now that work for me back at Panoramic, and they're all now, CEOs like Phil Wilding. He was a mining engineer at Savannah. He's now running Rocks. Timmy Mason's now COO at Black Cat. The list. I mean, Craig Jones and I work together. I mean, just a number of them. Terry Strong, Mark Reckley's runs, down at the tin mine in Tassie. These guys have all done really, really well, and all the young guys now that were sort of young, geologists are now, exploration managers and on various companies. It's great to see that, and I saw them when they were sort of straight out of university.
Awesome. You would have remembered those times when you were young,
very
to
much
be able
so.
to pass that information on. That's pretty bloody powerful.
Yeah. And it's about being recognised. When you're and that's what's great about small mining companies. When you do have access to the board and the senior management, and because some of the bigger companies, you just don't have that same involvement with those decision makers and stuff. And so, I say to anyone who's go and work for a small company for a while, because it is good fun. Yeah, and you learn a lot.
Beautiful. Mate, look, Pete, I've learnt a lot, and that's the name of the bloody game for me. But thank you very much for coming in. I know that you've obviously done great things, and you'll continue to do great things with Rumble Resources. Look forward to watching the progress.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure, Josh.
Thanks, mate. Thanks very much for tuning into another episode on the Gold Room Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this one. Pete's a bloody legend. Make sure you give it all the support you can, and go out and buy some shares in Rumble Resources.